Hello everyone, Francis Walsh here with the Personal Finance Diaries, and today we're going to be discussing whether you can sell your retirement annuity. To be honest, this is a little bit of a tricky question. There's quite a few different factors to consider. There are restrictions on selling retirement annuities, and there are also a certain set of circumstances in which it just doesn't really make sense. And even if you do make the decision to sell, there are a few specifics you'll have to take into account at that point to make sure you get the best possible deal and to make sure you're making the best decisions for your financial future. Not to worry though, we'll get into all of that in this video. So I suppose the first distinction that it's important to make here is between retirement annuities and lawsuit annuities, which are also kind of known as structured settlements. There are restrictions that apply to selling both, but they're different in nature. So if you're working with a lawsuit annuity, the main restriction is that if you decide to sell it for a lump sum, that you can do so. You need to have court approval to do so. So you need to apply to the court, and the court will make sure that it represents good value for you, and you're not getting ripped off essentially. This isn't obviously the case with a retirement annuity, which is done on the basis of a contract with an insurance company. The main restriction there will relate to those contracts. So basically it will be set out in your contract whether or not you're allowed to sell your annuity, and any restrictions that might apply if you do decide to sell. So this is going to be the main factor to consider for you when you're thinking about selling your retirement annuity. You will have to look at the contract language and make sure that what you want to do is in keeping with that. And also I would recommend getting the help of a financial advisor early in the process if you are considering this. First off, they'll be able to help you with the language of your contract and make sure that selling your annuity is an option that's available to you. And they will also be able to advise you on whether or not it represents kind of a good idea for you given your situation, and also how to best approach it in order to maximize the value of the transaction for you. So I suppose that's something to kind of maybe stress early on. Professional advice is your best friend in this situation. So next, we'll assume that you can sell your retirement annuity on the basis of your contract language. What comes next? Well, first off, there are two main phases to a retirement annuity. There's the accumulation phase and the annuitization phase. And the accumulation phase is the point at which you're paying into your annuitization policy. And the annuitization phase is the point at which payouts begin and you start getting your money back. And these two phases are very different in terms of how easy or difficult it is going to be to sell your annuity. Typically during the first phase, the accumulation phase, selling it is comparably easier. Once you get to the payout phase or the annuitization phase, your options tend to become more limited once you reach this point. Now, it's important to note that I am speaking in general terms here. Every annuity contract is different, and it may be the case that your particular annuity is difficult to sell during the accumulation phase, or maybe that it's easy to sell during the annuitization phase. But typically this is not the case. And again, I would just encourage you to speak to your financial advisor and go over your contract with them so that you can properly understand your options. So now that I've covered the practicalities of whether or not it may be possible to sell your annuity, I'm now going to discuss whether or not it might be a good idea to do so. So annuities, they're a handy financial tool from the point of view that they give you a regular income over a long period of time. And this is great for, sensible financial management, because essentially it takes a lot of the power out of your hands. You don't have a lump sum sitting in your bank account waiting to be blown. And if you decide to sell your annuity, you lose this advantage. So you leave yourself at the mercy, obviously, of reckless spending or of poor management or whatever else. So really, the only time I would recommend actually selling an annuity is when you need a lump sum of money. So let's say you have a big debt that you have to clear, particularly a high interest debt. It can then make sense to liquidate your annuity to clear some of that and save yourself money in the long run. Or if you've got a big life event that you just need a cash injection for, whether that's buying a home, investing in a business, or clearing some medical bills. Unless you're in a situation like this where you do kind of need money up front and it makes sense to clear away an expense like this, I would generally recommend leaving an annuity in place because it just makes it easier to manage the money more sensibly. And this is particularly the case if taxes or charges or surrender penalties are going to penalize you, quite a bit if you decide to liquidate your annuity. It's crucial to make sure that you're getting value for money. And on that point, the next section now I'm going to discuss is the providers that you might decide to use if you're selling an annuity, because these providers do vary in quality quite a bit. And one of the key differentiators here is, a provider's likelihood to give you a good deal if they're buying an annuity from you. And so the company I typically recommend to people looking to sell retirement annuities is Strategic Capital, which you can see on your screen. There are a number of competent providers in this space, and I've heard plenty of anecdotes of people doing good business with several of them. Strategic Capital is just, I think, the best, primarily because of its focus on individualization. It doesn't just provide a kind of a standardized template offer to people who approach it. It really is about giving you a dedicated agent, sitting down with you to figure out all your kind of requirements and your limitations and all this kind of thing. Discussing your situation in detail to make sure, things like tax implications and, everything else like that comes to the fore and is properly considered. And I'm just a really big fan of the service they offer. I also do think that their quotes typically are quite good, on the basis of, market standards. And typically I think people who decide to do business with them do well out of it. I would also give an honourable mention to Peachtree Financial here. They're another leading player in this space. My problem with them really is that they are owned by JG, so there can be a little bit of collusion that happens there, and it does tend to increase the prices a little bit for the consumer. So you're probably not going to get quite as good of a deal, but they are another leading provider and worth looking at if you're shopping around. But I suppose ultimately what my advice would be is to just make sure you consider this properly. Remember that you can sell a portion of your annuity rather than just the whole thing. This is something I would give due consideration, just because it can be a better way to meet expenses that you might have and then keep a bit of, regular income coming in as well, rather than liquidating your whole annuity and, leaving yourself at risk of blowing the whole thing, essentially. I suppose my underlying piece of advice here really is to consult with a financial advisor before you make any serious decisions regarding your annuity, because it is a big financial decision and it does obviously have lifelong repercussions. But other than that, best of luck, and I'll see you all in the next video.